Hi, I'm Philippa Kabali-Kagwa and I'm based in Cape Town, but I'm originally from Uganda. In 1977, the Archbishop Janani Wom was killed in Uganda. I was in boarding school then, and I remember that evening the headmistress called us to chapel and she told us that he had been killed. And there was an eerie darkness that hung over us. As teenagers, we didn't know what to say. People started crying. People wanted to go home, but we didn't know whether we could go home. And we knew something terrible was happening in Uganda. Well, I went home that holiday and we left. We left Uganda. My father was already living in Addis Ababa. My eldest sisters, two of them, and I left Kampala and went to join my father in Addis Ababa. My mother stayed behind with my brother and sister who had cerebral palsy. And then she left later, but she had to stay in Nairobi. And after a while, one of my sisters went to university in the States. My other sister went back to Uganda because she had to finish her A-levels. She had 2 terms of school left. I joined my mother and my other brother and sister in Nairobi, and my father stayed in Addis Ababa. And so for the next year or two, as a family, we were living in 4 different places. You see, when I started to reflect on that, I realized that when people talk about the 70s in Uganda, they talk about Idi Amin, they talk about the Asians as a group of people who had to leave Uganda. They talk about killings, but it's in a very generic way. And you don't hear the stories of real people who lived in that time. You don't hear the stories of, I've got lots of friends now from Uganda who live all over the world. New Zealand, the States, America, South Africa. And a lot of their being away from home now, their nomadic lives are rooted in that time in Uganda when there was political strife. And those stories are not told. We haven't shared them, not with our children. I also realized when I went back to Uganda that there's a generation that has not lived that life. And living here in South Africa, it's the same thing. There's a generation that they call the born frees, who were born after Mandela was free, after 1994. They never lived during the apartheid regime, and they don't know that life. And so, in writing my story from a very personal perspective, I'm also telling the story of a moment in time in Uganda, in Africa. And I think those stories need to be told because people need to know what happened in those times. People need to know also the impact of the politics on people's lives. And people need to also know that it's not all bad. You know, in writing the book, I keep connecting also with happy memories, with meeting a grandmother for the first time, Jaja Eumeli. And in our culture, the Baganda, we don't point at people with our fingers. We use our mouths. And the first person I remember seeing doing that was Jaja Eumeli. But she could point. Her lower lip was like a finger. And I remember sitting in that room with my eyes open wide, completely fascinated by this old lady. So I want to share with the world those stories, but I'm hoping that in writing my story, it will encourage people from different parts of the world to share their lives, to share normal everyday stories about things that have happened, the things that shape us.